alignment event with our good friends over at NETIV and YPS, along with Rabbi Karmi Ingber. We had a wonderful time last week where he spoke about Mashiach, conceptions and misconceptions, and today he's got a hot topic for us. He's going to talk about the three roots of personality and of world events. And I wonder if he's got anything to say on the Ukraine situation there. So yeah, it's on the top of my list to want to hear his feedback on that. So, let's just jump right in and see how Rabbi Ingber is doing today.
Okay, hi everybody. How are we all doing? Doing well?
You got your 5 by 5, Rabbi.
Great. All right, wonderful. Okay, so today's topic is the roots of personality, and we're going to see how it affects the world. Okay, so it's a kind of a deep topic, but it's also very practical. So I want to just jump right into it. We got to understand one thing. The way a human being is built is really the key to understanding the way the world's built. It's a very, very deep idea. When God created the world, he wants us to have understanding of the world. And therefore, there's a verse in the book of Job, in Eov, it says, Mi b'sari echsel okal. From my own self, I get the understanding of the entire world. Mi b'sari echsel okal. I can understand God's, I understand how God built the whole world. So when we look at ourselves, we understand how we function, and we understand that's a parallel to everything. So I want to talk about the traits that build us, that we have to work on. And I'm going to show you how all of our traits is built on these three central roots of traits and how it's affecting the world, how nations choose different traits and how that causes the situations in the world that we have. So let's understand like this. We have a head. Okay, our mind has things that are goals, and we think of the processes that we have to be able to go and to get what we want to get, have ideas. But then we come down from our minds to our bodies. And the top half of our body, our torso and arms, represent the part of us that takes the map and brings it into the world. And it's not an accident we have a right hand, a left hand, and a torso. These are the roots of bringing things into the world, and they are really the deeper understanding of our traits. So let's go like this. A right hand. What does the right hand do? So this is, by the way, if you're a lefty, your right becomes your left. It just means your stronger hand. We have one hand that's stronger, one hand's weaker. Why is that? Most people have a stronger and weaker hand. The stronger hand, which we'll call the right, if you're lefty, it's your left, is the idea of giving. Okay? It's the idea of getting out of ourselves and giving to others. It's called chesed, kindness. And that's why it's the stronger hand. Okay, the stronger hand is the one that we go and we give out into the world, chesed, kindness. Now, kindness is how it kind of all starts. Chesed is how things start, because to get out in the world, I need to expand. I got to take my ideas and bring them out into the world. So now I want to give somebody, but can I ever give in a way that's bad? Yes. For all you people pleasers out there, and there are many of us, we realize that sometimes we give people and we're actually hurting them. Okay? Sometimes you don't want to say no to somebody, but that's not a good thing. You have to know how to limit and say no. That's your left hand. And that's why it's the weaker hand, because the idea of saying no and the limitation is important. If it's not in place, you can harm somebody. If you don't know how to say no, somebody asks you for money. Like my brother runs a charity in Israel. And my brother does not go and give money to people. He goes and he has volunteers and he buys the food. He only gives them the food. Why does he do that? because he's afraid, like, he wants to make sure they have healthy food. So he doesn't want to give people money, and then they'll buy things that are not as good and not realized. So he makes sure that, no, I want to give, but I'm giving in a limited way. I want to make sure you get good, healthy food. So I'm limiting it. I'm saying I'm going to buy it. Our volunteers are going to buy the food for you, make sure it's good, healthy. That's the limitation. That's your left hand. So the right hand is you're giving, your kindness. The left hand says you want to give to someone, you got to sometimes say no. You give your kid, but if you don't ever say no to your child, you're harming the child. Then there is the balance, the middle, which is called in the Torah Tiferes, beauty or truth. And that is the perfect balance between, yes, giving, no limiting, and then the balance of it and saying, I'm always going to do what's right. I'm not leaning either way. These three traits are the root of all traits. And if you think about it, you can figure out in yourself, what is your prime trait? Are you naturally a giver? Are you somebody that wants to always give people? And then what is your sub-trait? Are you someone who cares about truth? And then I want what's true? And then, but I want to give as a subcategory of that. Am I someone who is very exacting and limiting and I want to do things just right? It's kind of like in today's language, you'd have the person who's, they have what's called FOMO, right? FOMO is the guy who doesn't want to miss out. Like if you want to go and I want to sell something to somebody, there's two ways to do it. One is you say, this is going to be the greatest thing you ever had. That's a right-hand person. That's the giver. The second guy says, you don't want to miss this. This is so great, you don't want to miss it. That's the left hand. Okay? It's right and left. Now, with this introduction, we're going to see some amazing things. The forefathers of the world, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, are these three traits. They bring these three traits into the world. Let's understand how that works. Abraham, and this is so great. I mean, like, I have some people here from my synagogue that we started in Atlanta, and they know the whole style, and I did it intentionally, was that Abraham was the greatest of the givers. He started a revolution. He came along and said, here, I'm coming to my house, I'm going to give you, I'm going to share with you. I'm going to, why? Because God gives us. Why are we alive? We're alive because God created us. He loves us. He wants for our good. So Abraham all of a sudden brings this message to the world, and people think this is crazy. How is this possible that this person is just opening it? It says his tent was open on all four sides. How is that possible? And he wasn't even asking any money. All he would say was the end. He would say, now the people would say, thank you. Don't thank me. Thank the one who gave it to us. And they would say, who's that? And he would say, that's God. And they were like, wow. So Abraham brought into the world, he brought God into the world by showing everyone that the goal of the creation was kindness, to give us. And it was a revolution. And by the way, it was the greatest revolution in history. Because today, as I mentioned last week, most people do believe that there's one God, and whatever confusions they may have, what that means. But, in the old days, they were all worshiping idols and powers and this and that. Today, that's the person who is recognized as an intelligent human being doesn't believe in multi-gods. That was Abraham's revolution. But the way he brought it in the world was kindness. He said, God created me. He loves us. He wants to give. And I'm a representative of that. I give kindness. And that's what he did. And what happened was Abraham had a tremendous following. Tremendous. It says that the Nefesh HaSubachorim, people just gathered around him. They never saw anything like it. They never heard anything like this. And they said, wow, if that's the way the world is, then I want to be part of this. If that's the way God is, I want to be part of this. That was Abraham's revolution of kindness. Now, Abraham had a son whose name was Yitzchak, right? Now, Yitzchak had a very different approach. And that's why the sages asked, where did all the students of Abraham go? He had all of these followers, all the people that were converting or with him, where'd they all go? And the sages tell us when his son took over, they eventually left. They didn't like Yitzchak's approach. Yitzchak's approach was like, hey, do the thing right. Abraham's approach was, here it is. And Yitzchak said, yeah, okay, but like now you gotta do it right. You can't just go and everything's good. So the people, they didn't like that so much. They were like, yeah, Avram was fun, right? Right, kids? You imagine, someone's giving you all the good stuff's great. All of a sudden, the guys, hey, sit up nice, sit at the table. What are you doing? People don't like that. Now, Yitzchak's quality, therefore, was the self-restraint called the left hand. Now, I wanted to be clear of that. The self-restraint means really controlling yourself. It means a person like and I'm sure you know this, you've seen this. There are people who are very expansive. A lot of times they're a little bit messy, they have ideas, they're expanding. And there's some people that are very precise, very exact. And you kind of need both. Yitzchak was that. He was the person who was exactly on himself. He never wanted to do the wrong thing. He was very, very controlled and had restraint in his own activities, and therefore others too. Now, I want to tell you an amazing thing here. The sages tell us that if Abraham had a child that followed in his path, the world would have blown up. The world could never have succeeded. And you know why? Could you imagine a world where I tell you, I love you, and whatever you do is okay? So in the beginning, it's great. Wow, I love this. But after a while, there's the people who are doing negative things won't stop. Because everything's okay. So if Yitzchak would have taken Abraham's approach, the world couldn't handle it. It was a perfect balance. It was the right hand and the left hand. Abraham was all about giving, and Yitzchak said, okay, this is great, but there's got to be a limit to it. Now, this means that Abraham and Yitzchak really had the approach that we all need to do. Because you might be a giver, but if you're only giving, you're going to hurt people and yourself. That's why Abraham had 10 tests. What were his 10 tests? And all of his tests were in the quality of restraint, of, hey, you're a loving, giving person, but you got to say no sometimes. All of his tests. He had to kick out his son Yishmael, who he loved dearly. Right? Had to leave his old father to go to the land of Israel. They're all the same. They're all things that nice people don't do. But sometimes, even if you're a nice person, I got to do this. Otherwise, I'm not doing the right thing. There's all his tests till the final test. What was his final test? Was to take his beloved son, who's waited his whole life, and bring him up as an offering. For a person like Abraham, that's impossible for anybody. But for the ultimate giver, this act was, but he said yes, because it's the act of saying no for the greater purpose. Otherwise, I'm not helping. And we have to realize, guys, what I'm telling you today, this is some high philosophy here, and there's going to be a lot of deep things in the world, but this is very practical to our lives. Because if you're always that giver, you must get yourself to say no. Otherwise, you're not helping others and you're not helping yourself. And that's what Avram did. Now, Yitzchak, fascinatingly enough, and that's why Avram became whole. That's why after the 10th test, it says in the text, God says, now I know you're Yirat Elokim. You fear God. It means because love and fear are these two components. Love is the expansion, and fear is, awe is, I got a limit. I mentioned this in a class I was giving last week. I was once I was in the park, and there was this kid. He was throwing a football to this older guy, And the kid was throwing, he's going, Billy, Billy, go long. He throws the ball to Billy, and and Billy dropped the ball. And the kid screamed, Billy, come on. And I was thinking it was really weird, Billy's this older guy, and the kid is. And then I found out that Billy was the father. And I said, that's no good. The law is you can't call your father and your mother by their first names. You know why? Because you have to love your parents, but if you love them and you don't have a sense of that they're your parents, you skew the relationship and you have a problem. That's love is like the gas pedal, and awe is the brakes. So like in life, you go forward, you say, you feel love to God, but then if you have no awe and you don't stay back and say, look at the starry skies, it's unbelievable. If you don't have that awe, then you have a wrong sense of God and everything. The wrong sense of your parents, wrong sense of God, because they're my buddy. No, there has to be both. There's a gas pedal, and when you go forward and you give, you have to brake and then take a moment of awe, and then you can go forward again, right? A car without a gas pedal is very boring. And a car without brakes, I had one like that. That's not recommended. Okay, so that was Abraham was the giver. Yitzchak was the quality of restraint. And now Yitzchak has to become a whole person also. How does he become whole? Yitzchak was so nervous that he would do the wrong thing. He was always self-analyzing, restricting. How do I limit? How do I act this right way? He did it so much until the point where he said, one of the qualities of being a right person is to be a giver. And because he was so concerned with being whole and so nervous he wouldn't be exactly right, he then forced himself to become the giver also. And that's the same thing for all of us. If you're somebody that's always challenging yourself and saying, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? You're very, self-analyzing and very concerned about it. Then you have to say to yourself, one of the qualities I need to become this person I want to be is to be also sometimes expansive. And then Yitzhak pushed himself. And that's what the text says. He went, he brought offerings in Beersheba. That means he pushed himself to get out of his limitations. And he became whole too. Now we're going to take this idea and we're going to bring this into incredible world history. And what I'm going to tell you soon, you're going to be shocked, and you're going to question if what I'm saying can even possibly be true, because it's going to be so incredibly amazing what we're going to talk about. So now, Abraham has a child before Yitzchak is born, and his name is Yishmael. And Yishmael is the father of the Arab nation. Now, as all people, there's good traits and bad traits. The sages tell us Yishmael's trait that he learned from Abraham was kindness. That's what he learned from him. And like, my brother years and years ago traveled in North Africa. And he told me, he said there was a rule that they had in the Arab countries. They had to take you in for 3 days. Fourth day, not so much. You had to be careful the fourth day sometimes. But 3 days, they learned from Abraham an idea of kindness. Now, if kindness is not balanced, it could become very, very bad. If you notice here, those, I'll give an example here. When people are, let's say, they used to have a song in 1969. It was an old song about, if you can't be with the one you love, free love, free love, free love. Now, that is a problem. Because if you're like an expansive person, but you don't have boundaries, you could actually come to very negative things. And this is what the sages call kindness that's fallen into the impurity stage. And even though Yishmael was the descendant of Abraham, and he had kindness, but it wasn't balanced. And therefore, there was a lack of parameters. There was a lack of, that could come to theft. You know why? Because people who are like, yeah, I'm expansive, yeah, it's all that. So there's no boundaries. So, hey, so this is yours. What do you care? What do I care? That is the negative side of kindness. When it's not balanced, it leads to illicit relations. It leads to theft. It's a whole mindset. And that came out from Avraham when it was not in the perfect situation. And that was his descendant Yishmael, who had a lot of good qualities and a lot of ideas of giving, but giving that wasn't always so good, and giving in places he shouldn't give. Now, who was the other side? The other side was Yitzchak, who was limitations, self-restraint, self-control, boundaries. And he has two sons. He has Esau, Esav, and Jacob, who's the father of Jewish people. Now, who is Esav the father of? Esau, it says he is at least the spiritual, question if he's the physical, but the spiritual leader of what's going to become Rome. That's going to be Rome in the future. Now, what was Rome? Rome was exactly like Yitzchak. It was control, but instead of being control over the self, what was it? Control over others. And that's why he was the warrior. Rome were warriors, right? They create war. That's what they're about. Because their quality was control, but misplaced control, not holy control. It was not control in a way that was on me. It was control on you. And therefore, the nation that came out from Yitzchak that was not perfectly balanced was his descendant Esav, who became known as the Torah text tells us, it says he is the father of Edom. Edom is going to be Rome. Now, the word Edom means red. You know why it's red? Red is blood and fire and anger. So you got two qualities of the right hand and left hand. When they're misused, Abraham, it's great. He's the giver. He balanced himself. He became whole. Yitzchak is self-restraint. He balanced himself, became expansive also. But when those two things are not balanced right, you get the quality that Yishmael has, giving but not proper. It has not the right boundaries. And then you have Esav, who is control, but it's not control in the productive way. It's controlling others, and that's war and anger. Okay, now we're going to get a little bit. You're going to be shocked at what I tell you now, probably. But the sages tell us an amazing thing. The word, you know what happened in Rome, right? Rome was an empire, and then Rome took on a religion that became the Holy Roman Empire, took on Christianity. Now, fascinating enough, the name Esav, when you flip the letters around in the text, the word Esav, it spells the name Yeshu, which was the Hebrew name of JC. Fascinating. That means that the spiritual leader, Esav, it became the Rome, which became Christianity. And now watch something so even more amazing. Look at the two religions that were created now from Yishmael and from Esav. Yishmael, who is the giver without the boundaries, creates a religion called Islam. Islam means submission. So if your hand is reaching out where it shouldn't, the cure is cut the hand off. So Yishmael actually created a religion that was like what they saw as the antidote to their own expanding in a way they shouldn't have. What did the other side, Esav, create? What they created was if they were about war, they said let's make a religion we call a religion of love. Whatever you do, it's okay. There's no rules anymore. There's no rules. It's amazing. They took literally the opposite thing to deal with their own qualities. while not balancing them properly, but putting whatever they believed was the antidote for their situation. Now, what was the proper approach? Proper approach was Jacob, Yaakov, Israel. He took the quality of giving of Avraham, the quality of restraint and boundaries of Yitzchak, and he put it into himself in what's called beauty, tiferes, and truth. And that is a line that when a person really balances, you're not all tilted to one side, tilted to the other side, but you really have your head on straight, and this is what's true, then that is the quality of Yaakov. And that's the concept of truth, and that can't be moved. Because yes, I'm a giver, but I don't give because I'm a people pleaser, and I don't give because I don't like my own boundaries. I give because it's the right thing to do. And I have control. I have, I have restraint, but I don't restrain myself in a way that I shut down. I don't restrain myself that I restrain others. I say no because it's the right thing to do. That's the ultimate balance. Now, again, as far as our personalities go, everyone's different. It doesn't mean if you're not if you're a person that's naturally a giver or naturally more of a FOMO person that I have, I don't want to miss out. You could become whole, but by balancing it, by saying, if I'm the giver, I have to know to say no. And if I'm the person who's more introverted, I have to know how to get out sometimes. But the ultimate balance is Yaakov. He is, the balance of it, he's called truth. And that's why it's an amazing thing that happened, guys. And this is how, what I'm going to tell you, in unfolding events of history is just amazing. But if you look in the story of the Torah, when Yaakov was coming back, he ran away after he had got the blessings. He ran away. He was afraid of Esav. He ran away. When he came back, and there was a showdown between him and Esav. You know what Esav did before? If you look in the text, it says Esav went and he married the daughter of Yishmael. So what he tried to do is he tried to take the quality of himself, which was power and fighting, to the quality of Ishmael, which was this expansiveness. He tried to combine them to be able to battle Yaakov. And I want to tell you something that's even more amazing. And this is what it says in the prophecy in Ezekiel, that in the future, what's going to happen? There's what's called these, cataclysmic events that come in the end of days, and it talks about the Western world, which is the descendants of Esav, uniting with some of the Arab forces to come against Israel. That you can look in the prophecy in Yechezkel, in chapter 38 there, you can look, and that's what's describing. And what happens is, it's amazing. They want to come to fight against the Jews, but what happens is at a certain point, their alliance crumbles. You know why the alliance crumbles? Because they want to go against the Jews, but then they realize, wait a minute, you don't agree with me either. So they turn around, you're an infidel. They got problems getting together. Because I don't know if you know this, but you realize this, one of the reasons communism never works is because when everyone says, I'm going to be the leader, we're going to make this for everyone. We're all going to be equal, it's not, but then somebody wants to be in charge. And someone else wants to be in charge. Because when you can't really put people together if they're not working for a higher goal, when the goal is myself, I can't combine that because I really, yes, I'm saying communism, but I'm saying I want to be the leader. Okay, he wants to be the leader. So they really can't get together. They try to put together, but they really can't, because the only way to become truth is when you really put together all of the extremities, your giving and your restraint. It's balanced in a way that's for the sake of what's right, not for the sake of getting what you want to get. Now, here comes the last point I want to share with you. And this one is just really unbelievable. One of them you know, one of them is well known, and one of them is not so well known. It's kind of discussed in the world, and it's not well known in the world either. But I heard it from one of my rabbis who said this was correct, and this is fascinating. And he brought it to us from a deep mystical teaching that talks about these two Jews. It's a very strange teaching. So what is it teaching? The nations, we just start with Abraham. Abraham, in his kindness, look what happened. He became like the leader of the whole world, essentially, right? The Jewish people came out of Abraham. The Muslims on the other side of Abraham. The Christians on the other side. Not only that, this I can't tell you as a fact, but it's a conjecture, but it's probably true. It says that Abraham had other children. He sent them to the east and he gave them spiritual powers. And if you look historically, the Brahmin, which was the higher class in India, the timeline they show up in India is the same time that Abraham sent his children. The word Brahmin is Abraham. So most likely, the leaders of all of the different angles of the world came from Abraham. The Jewish people from Isaac and Jacob, Muslims on one side, Christians on the other side, and Eastern people on the other side. It's quite fascinating. But what I heard from one of my rabbis, Moshe Zatzal, he said that we know that JC was Jewish. He was a rabbinic student. He was a student of Yeshua Parachia, and he started making up his own ideas. And there was a fight between him and his rabbi, and his rabbi Yeshua Parachia chased him out, and he made up his own approach. So the world attached a religion to a Jew who had separated from the Jewish root. What people don't realize is that Islamic scholars, there are many Islamic scholars who claim that Muhammad's mother was Jewish. Now that would mean that by Jewish law, it goes after the mother. That would mean that Muhammad was actually Jewish too, which would mean it was the other Jew who went out of the system and people attached to him to try to find a way to get into the truth. But thank God you're all here saying, I want to get into truth. How do I do this? That's the beauty of it. We don't have to go and create new religions and new things. We have to just go with the true path that God gave us. I know somebody asked a question last week about the idea of being a Noahide, because it's strange because it's not a different religion. Everyone's a Noahide. It means that the descendants of Noah, the Jewish people have a mission. People who are in the world have a mission. It's not a separate religion. It's the idea of how do I express what is true to who I am. A Jewish person needs the 630 commandments to do it. A person who's not born Jewish does not need the seven, he or she needs the 7 commandments of morality. And that is the truth. That is the balance. It will balance you to the point where you're not going to be just giving uncontrolled, and you're not going to be limiting yourself uncontrolled. You'll be lined up with, I want to express what is true. These are the qualities of our personality. They're the way God set the world up, that we have to figure out what our strength is. Who are we? And balance it and make sure we get to wholeness. You can't be whole being lopsided. You got to be whole by balancing the two sides to coming out to the approach of truth, which was the approach of Jacob. And the world, which is creating wars and fighting, and what they're doing is they're grabbing on to different systems based on their own challenges. If I'm a person that doesn't know how to limit myself, so I can create a religion that you cut the hands off, but that I don't know. You have to hook into fixing up whatever challenges we have in ourselves to make sure that we are whole. And that's why this idea that I've expressed to you today, these 3 traits, which is called in Torah chesed, giving, gevura, boundaries and restraints, and tiferes, beauty or truth. These qualities are the qualities we need to find in ourselves, to balance ourselves, and the world needs to find in themselves. And without the world finding in themselves, they're going to look for other things and try to combine things that won't go. And that's what I said to you in the story. At the end, they actually want to fight against the land of Israel and try to have a war to try to take control, because they can't admit what's true. And if you don't admit what's true, you don't deal with it that way, the people start doing other things that they see won't be successful, and it falls apart in the end because you can't combine things that don't stick. Okay, that's the thought, and we're going to open it up to questions, thoughts, and ideas.